How a Romance Novel Saved the Galaxy by Ariana Derote. Chapter 39. Mace 4. Terra Sinube set his tray down next to Mace's. He took his time peeling a fruit and setting the resulting wedges into some porridge. Mace finished his own late midday meal in the time it took him.
"I'll need some help after the meal if you feel up to it," said Terra finally. "We'll have to leave the temple."
Mace was all for that. This morning's council session had been grueling, even though the pause to watch Master Fame verbally take down Yoda had been an unexpected delight.
"Of course,"
he said. Terra pulled out a pad and tilted it so that Mace could see the screen. "Terra, could you check on Quinlan for me? The Force tells me he's gone and done something stupid."
"Dalm." "Quinlan Voss?"
asked Mace. The Kefar Padawan was a troublemaker on a good day who tended to get stir-crazy when his master was out of the temple. This was a common occurrence since Thalm was often on missions that weren't appropriate for a 14-year-old. Thalm was currently investigating a bunch of missing children reports from along the Perlemian trade route near Gizar. He had rightfully refused to take his Padawan into such a situation, but considering Knight Fisto had caught Voss trying to dye one of the fountains in the Room of 1,000 Fountains purple just the other day, Voss was undoubtedly unhappy about being left behind.
"Yes, Quinlan. Thalm often asks me to check on him while he's gone. Boy's doing curious for his own good, eh?" "So you checked in on him and couldn't find him,"
said Mace.
"Yes,"
Terra said, then took a slow bite of his porridge. Terra's pad chimed. He pulled it back toward him to scroll through it. His eyes widened. He pushed the pad over to Mace, then began to eat much faster than before. Master Sinube. While looking for Voss, we discovered that the initiate he has a bond with, Aila Sakura, is also missing. Quinlan has been known to take her on adventures with him around the temple. Please make sure he is with her and that he returns her as soon as possible. Marto. Mace bust his and Terra's trays before they both headed towards the main entrance of the temple.
"Where do you think they are?" "Ever since the book was accidentally sent to every Jedi, Padawan Kira always been the subject of a lot of curiosity and some envy. Quinlan has been hounding her with questions, eh?"
Mace was honestly a bit surprised that it hadn't required the second email telling the Jedi not to read it for the boy to read the book, but he supposed Padawan Kiro's presence had prompted Voss to take a look at it.
"You think he's gone to see some Mandalorians?"
Terra nodded.
"I imagine he's gone to Little Kildabe. It's on the opposite side of the planet and several levels down. We better get moving if we want them back before nightfall."
Little Kildabe didn't have any markers indicating you were in Mandalorian territory, but the spicy smells that wafted in the air and the appearance of a large number of Mandalorians in full or partial armor was a big giveaway. So was their utter shock in the Force, or through body language, at two grown Jedi appearing in their midst. Mace briefly wished they could have come incognito, but dismissed that as a pipe dream. Voss had undoubtedly not been hiding his or Aila's presence. Terra ambled over to a booth which appeared to be selling meat on skewers covered in a bright red sauce. The Mandalorian behind the booth had vambraces and pauldrons, but if they had any other armor on, it was covered by the big spice-stained apron.
"Excuse me, young one,"
said Terra, going for his best senile elder impression. The seller was pushing 50s for a human.
"Have you seen a young Kifar with a yellow tattoo across his face, possibly accompanied by a young Twi'lek?"
Mace was feeling rather tense, considering the eyes of every Mandalorian in the street were on them, and some were drifting their way towards them. The Force was calm, but Mace's base instincts were screaming at him, so he turned away from the food stall so he was facing them. Some looked away, others blushed that they'd been gone, but being Mandalorians, quite a few just returned the stare. One Zabrak leered. "He and the other ad are playing," said the seller, waving a hand towards their right.
"Thank you,"
said Terra, before hobbling off in that direction, going extra heavy on the game. It occurred to Mace that unless there were some elderly Mandalorians around, all the Mandalorians' more prurient attention was going to be on him, he sighed. Near the end of the street were two Mandalorians, one seated on a box, the other standing, rifle in hand. They were essentially standing guard over an entryway between the corners of two buildings. Don't worry, Jenny. We've been keeping an eye on them, said the seated Mandalorian on the right in blue and yellow armor. Neither guards stopped them as they went through. The area past there was a courtyard boxed in on both sides by buildings with lighting affixed to the ceiling overhead. The courtyard had 2 large circles drawn at either end, which no doubt figured in some game involving balls, but that was not what it was being used for. Quinlan was stood right in the center of the courtyard in a crude circle drawn in chalk. Would have to be every single Mandalorian child and teen in Little Caldabe was throwing balls at him with all their strength. Quinlan was using the Force to dodge, flip, or redirect every ball that came near him. Mace would have been more impressed by the display if he didn't spot Isla with 2 other under 5-year-olds sitting on a series of crates along one wall. She was cheering excitedly for Quinlan, quite oblivious to the balls whizzing right by her and the other younglings. Enough! Mace added a touch of the Force to his voice to amplify it. The Mandalorian stopped throwing. Quinlan dodged some final balls, but Mace's attention was on Isla and her friends. Luckily, Tara's attention was also there, and he had frozen the ball that was about to hit the Zabrak toddler on her left in the face. Were any of you watching and protecting the younglings from stray balls? A dark-skinned human teen winced, as did many of the others. Sorry, sir. The balls don't usually get anywhere near that area. Tara came up the 3 little ones following behind him, hands clasping each other, with Ayla clinging to his ropes. Next time you play, you will be more aware of your surroundings, eh? He says. Yes, sir. Like, Jenny. Their replies all overlapped each other, the oldest especially coming to attention. Once he was satisfied they were taking Tara seriously, Mace turned his attention to Voss, who made a show of looking unconcerned. Playtime is over, Padawan boss. Sure, yes, sir, he said cheekily. Mace had no idea how Thalmay dealt with him. A glance over at Ayla showed she was beginning to look disgruntled and tired. Mace knew from his own time working in the creche as a Padawan that this was a child in desperate need of a nap. The Zabrak toddler on her right had a very similar face, while the third near-human child simply walked over to one of the older kids and was immediately picked up and hugged. Mace was wondering what to do with the Zabrak toddler when a large Mandalorian in green and silver armor strode into the courtyard and went straight for the kid. The little Zabrak rushed to hug one enormous calf before being picked up one-handed to cuddle against the being's armor. Mace was surprised to feel a whisper of the Force as the Mandalorian reached out with it to double-check on the child. You have the Force, he said. He didn't know why he was surprised. Up until a few months ago, he doubted the Mandalorians ever even considered giving up their children to the Jedi. For all that they were a big being, the voice that came out of the helmet was soft-spoken. I do have some of the courage, Jedi. It doesn't work all the time, but it has saved me and brought me my head. If Mace wasn't mistaken, their helmet was Beskar, which meant it was rather impressive they could reach the Force at all with no training. The Jedi would be happy to offer you some tips, if you are so inclined. Mace said he didn't think it was prudent to ask if they had considered the Beskar issue. I will think on it, they said after a long moment. Say goodbye to your friends, Adika. The little Zabrak waved, and their mouth moved in a soft goodbye that was lost to the children behind them, waving and yelling goodbye back. Turning, he saw that Vos was waving as well. He motioned for the Padawan to follow him over to one side of the area, while Tara seamlessly switched to asking the Mandalorian kids friendly questions, Ayla leaning entirely against his leg. Explain yourself, Padawan, said Mace once he was sure they were out of hearing range of anyone. We weren't in any danger. I read that book. They never hurt kids, said Quinlan. That book was set thousands of years ago, Padawan Vos. The Mandalorians have a terrorist group called Death Watch, who is known for not treating children well. What if you had run into one of them here? And the other Mandalorians would have protected us the same way they would any kid, said Quinlan stubbornly. Kiro gets to come here all the time. Mace sighed. Very well, let's say you weren't in danger. You failed to consider the other reason we're not sending field trips to Little Keldabe and why Padawan Kiro is safe. What? The Mandalorian's dilemma doesn't exaggerate how easily and quickly they adopt children. You at least have a master, whose permission I hope they'd ask. But Isla, you're lucky they didn't whisk her away or adopt her on the spot. Quinlan looked dismayed. But I told them she was my future Padawan. Well, at least he now knew why Voss had chosen this particular initiate, and that he hadn't grabbed one at random. He wouldn't put it past the boy.
What makes you think they can't adopt her, but still let you train her?
Or co-parent her, judging by how the Mandalorians seemed to assign familiar relations to Jedi lineages.
Jumba! Said Voss. Language, Padawan. Okay, so this wasn't the best of my ideas. I won't bring Isla next time.
Force give him strength.
You won't have a lot of free time for a while. What would needing to translate the local agricultural papyri?
Hopefully that would keep him occupied long enough for Thom to return from his mission. Quinlan groaned.
Not again!
They were just getting in the air taxi and making their escape from the ever-present stares of the Mandalorians when one of them approached. Mace handed a dozing Ayla off to Quinlan and motioned for him to get inside the speeder. The Mandalorian had their helmet off, but had orange armor with white highlights. Excuse me, Jedi. Armorer Sutra requests the presence of a Jedi to discuss our Ade. Armorers had only been mentioned in passing in the Mandalorian's dilemma, but it was obvious from how they were spoken of and quoted in Mandalorian news and historical sources that they held some sort of power in Mandalorian society. Mace also didn't mind another excuse to keep him far away from council meetings for a bit longer, even if this was likely to bring up even more issues the council needed to address regarding the Mandalorians. He made eye contact with Tara, who was inside the transport, and the Elder Master nodded. He'd get Quinlan and Isla home to the temple, and get Quinlan started on his translation punishment. Mace bowed to the Mandalorian.
Please lead the way.
He noted that a lot of the surrounding Mandalorians went back to what they'd been doing before staring at the Jedi. Apparently, the summons by the Armorer took precedent over their aggressive admiration. The Armorer was inside a room which had steps leading down to a pedestal with controls on one side. Positioned above the plinth was the ion engine from some sort of small craft. It was currently on and melting what Mace guessed was Beskar. Rather than distract them from their task, Mace politely studied the rest of the room. Mandalorian armor, some covered in old paint and blaster scars, some new and gleaming in the light from the engine glow, stood against the walls. One bench held multiple examples of different types of vambraces. Another held pauldrons of various sizes and shapes. Along one wall was a mural, or rather a mosaic. Different shaped flat pieces of metal, tinged in different colors, were interlocked together to show a scene of a rearing mythosaur fighting against ancient Mandalorians. It was a beautiful piece. Behind them the engine shut off, and more natural light gradually flooded the room. Mace turned to find Armorer Sutra studying what they had created. It was a pair of lower leg pieces. Mace believed they were called greaves. He took the opportunity to study the Armorer in return. They had brown skin and bared arms. One arm gleamed with muscles and sweat, while the other was made of Beskar and iron. A heavy fireproof apron covered their front half, though Mace could see the shine of armor underneath. Their helmet was gold and silver. It seemed to be a slightly different style from the ones Mace was used to seeing. The dark iron of the inner parts of their arm was covered by a flowing mosaic of Beskar figures of animals locked in battle with each other. It was a bit mesmerizing how they all interlocked together without interfering in the arm's movement.
Your arm is beautiful,
said Mace sincerely when he realized he had been looking a bit too long. He was studied for a long moment, as if they were judging his sincerity before they nodded.
Thank you. I'm Armorer Kurtos Sutra. Caesar.
Mace bowed.
Armorer Sutra. I am Jedi Master Mace Windu. Him. How can I help you?
I have been asked by Padawan Kuro's board to plan the Vergoten, but I felt it prudent to consult with the Jedi. The Jedi board hasn't been here since their request, so I thought I'd take the opportunity with so many Jedi appearing today.
Vergoten?
Asked Mace. The word sounded familiar, considering how much Mandalorian culture he'd learned in the past several days, but it couldn't place it.
What do you... to be born to...
Z sounded like Z was trying to translate the word directly into standard, but Mace thought he got the idea.
It's a coming-of-age ritual for Mandalorian warriors.
The armorer inclines her head. Not a ritual, but yes, a test for Ade to prove they are ready to be Mandalorian warriors.
What does the test usually entail?
It varies greatly, but it is a test of their skill as a warrior.
They might be tasked with defeating another warrior in combat, retrieving a hard-to-obtain item, or much harder, finding themselves.
May smiled.
Sounds like when we send the initiates to find the lightsaber crystals. All the solo missions for senior Padawans.
Our cultures have a lot more similarities than differences, Z said. Maze could hear the smile in their voice. It was evening now, and Maze decided to take a gamble. Their arms, both the real and metal ones, were very attractive, and Mace had a fondness for artists.
Perhaps we could discuss this a bit more private? Over dinner?
I had no ulterior motive inviting you here, Z said, but Z sounded hopeful.
Oh no,
said Maze, because the Force had confirmed it.
But I hope that doesn't prevent me from wanting to get to know you more.
It had been several days since he'd been without a headache from all the shatter points, but right now his head was clear and pain-free. He was going to take the opportunity to enjoy himself.
It doesn't,
said Sutra. Z began to efficiently clear their workspace.
How do you feel about Tigilar?